Right now, you're watching this video because you chose to click on it. But how much choice did you really have?
I mean, the universe has sort of just pushed you to this point in time.
And whatever you are, you're not a deterministic clockwork machine.
My mind would say determinism, and my heart says free will.
Knowledge that change is extremely hard to impossible, and yet that striving to be better human beings is still a worthwhile endeavor.
The debate between whether we have free will or we just abide by the strict rules of determinism is one that goes back for millennia. Let's talk about what these concepts really mean and discuss ways in which we can use these ideas to improve our lives regardless of which one holds true. I want to first define these terms so we're all on the same page. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines free will as being the freedom of humans to make choices that are not determined by prior causes or by divine intervention. In other words, free will means you can do whatever you want regardless of what happened in your past and regardless of whether or not there's a God in the picture. For determinism, we have a theory or doctrine that acts of the will, occurrences in nature, or social or psychological phenomena are causally determined by preceding events or natural laws. So for this theory, the idea is that everything we do, and everything that happens in nature for that matter, is due to everything that happened in the past in conjunction with some set of universal laws. So basically, the past predicts the future. It's thought that humans started questioning this topic around the time of the ancient Greeks. Philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle are known to have had discussions about free will, but it's hard not to believe that early humans could have been pondering this idea well before the Greeks, but just simply never wrote it down. Now, you can hardly talk about the idea of free will without bringing religion into the picture. Most religions involve the idea of an afterlife, and how you choose to exercise your free will during your time here on Earth determines what happens to you in that afterlife. The common assumption among monotheists is that God gives us free reign to act as we please, and it would hardly make sense to have to spend eternity in hell if you didn't have any control over your choices throughout your life. But in fact, there are some people that believe just that. If you've heard of the clockmaker theory, it's this idea that sort of blends the concepts of divinity and science as we know it. The belief is that God created the universe, wound it up like a clock, and simply let it run its course. But I feel like this theory leaves us with more questions than answers. The first being the one we already touched upon. How can God judge you at the pearly gates if you were just acting out the rules predetermined by this clock?
But you can't do this to me.
My second question on this would be, why would God bother doing this anyway? What's the point of watching over a universe that you already know the result of? It seems like if you're a God, you'd have better things to do with your time. Or does God not experience time? All right, let's stay on topic here. One last point on the topic of religion. Many determinists will say there can't be free will because there's simply no scientific proof for it. There's nowhere inside of us that we've been able to point to and say that's where our free will lives. But I will say, if there's a God who could have created the universe, it's not so hard to believe that he could have also given us the ability of free will while leaving no scientific evidence for it. And in fact, many theists will use this exact point as proof of a God. It's called the God of the gaps theory. And it's this idea that whenever there's a phenomenon in life that we don't have a scientific explanation for, then the only explanation can be divine intervention. But the thing about this concept is we're just constantly making new discoveries about science. A few hundred years ago, we didn't know what a germ was. People would have pointed to God to explain bacterial infections, and yet we later discovered a very straightforward scientific explanation for them. Transitioning now into more of this scientific point of view, as someone who has always been big on science and scientific explanations, I'll never understand people who use a lack of scientific evidence as a way of trying to actively disprove something. I mean, scientists used to think that the earth was flat. Chemists thought that you could turn base metals into gold through alchemy, including Isaac Newton. And this one might be my favorite. Before the invention of the railways, some believed that traveling over the speed of 30 miles per hour would make it difficult to breathe and could even cause death.
We're gonna have to go right to ludicrous speed.
So my point is, just because we don't yet understand something doesn't mean we should be so quick to write it off as an impossibility. Since we can probably agree that science offers no indisputable explanation at this point, let's look at this from a philosophical standpoint. Think about what happens when you see a young child misbehaving or causing a disruption in public. Assuming they're pretty young, you're probably not going to think, wow, this kid sucks. Who do you blame? You blame the parents for the way they're raising their child, or maybe for bringing the child to this particular venue in the first place?
If you bring a baby into a movie theater You're a piece of shit.
We don't expect the baby to have the free will to not cry during the movie, but somewhere along the line, that baby grows up and we do hold them fully accountable for every action they take. The justice system and the penalty of incarceration are a common point of discussion when it comes to free will versus determinism. It's basically the same question we posed earlier about the afterlife. How can you throw someone in prison if they don't have any autonomy in the choices they've made? I've heard Jordan Peterson argue that our legal system is wholly based on the idea that we have free will. But I have to completely disagree with my boy Jordan on this one. Punishing criminals doesn't necessarily mean we believe that we have free will. I can think of several reasons why our justice system would look pretty similar even if free will was completely debunked. Number one, you at least temporarily stop that person from repeating that crime, or committing other crimes for that matter. You know, someone robs a bank, now they're in prison, they're no longer able to rob banks. Doesn't really matter if they had a choice to do it or not. We can't just let them run around committing crimes over and over again. Number two, the idea is that by punishing criminals, you will introduce the experience that will make them change their ways to make better moral decisions in the future, right? So this is the idea of rehabilitation. I'm not saying it works, and there's no question that the US justice system needs a lot of work. I'm just saying that's at least the intention. And number three, which I think is pretty straightforward, if people know there are punishments involved for committing crimes, they're less likely to commit them in the first place. Doesn't matter if free will exists or not. Now, at the same time, it does seem like having a deterministic mindset would leave you more open to finding forgiveness in people. If you believe entirely in free will, then anytime someone wrongs you, it's because they're a bad person or because they wanted to harm you intentionally. Whereas if you take into account that people are strongly affected by the experiences they've had and the brain they were born with, you're better equipped to show sympathy for people's mistakes and wrongdoings. And to me, whether you believe in strict determinism or not, there's no denying that both nature and nurture play a strong role in affecting people's decision making. I mean, look at all the studies that have been conducted on childhood trauma. It undoubtedly has a negative impact on people throughout their lives. I think that's proof of at least a partially deterministic reality, whatever that would mean. The last thought I'd like to pose, something I've really wrestled with because I wanted to believe in free will, I really did, but my question is, what would free will really even mean? It must mean that there's some you that makes decisions and transcends the chemical reactions going on in your brain. I think the only explanation for that would be the existence of some sort of soul. So let's go with that. Let's say souls exist. We all have one. They're all unique. There's good souls. There's evil souls, souls that prefer the color red and ones that prefer the color blue. But here's my problem with that explanation. You didn't choose your soul any more than you chose the brain you were born with or the experiences you had as a child. So if you were born with an evil soul and you go around committing horrible acts because of it, then you didn't really choose that life either, did you? It seems like that leads us back to an explanation of some sort of determinism. So all in all, did I help you get to the bottom of this, or did I maybe leave you with more questions than you had before watching? Either way, I'll note that the takeaway I had from researching all of this is I don't think it really matters what the answer is. If you believe in free will, then great. Go be a good person, make good decisions, and use your free will to improve your life and the lives of those around you through your own sheer desire. On the other hand, if you believe in strict determinism, then that's fine too. You're watching this video, so you're probably an inquisitive person who likes learning new information and keeping an open perspective. So just continue to feed yourself the information you need to become the person you want to be. And I actually talked about a subject that's right up this alley in another video. So if you're interested in ways you can literally rewire your brain to be a better version of you, go check that out next. And if you can muster up any free will, please use it to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one.